All right, it's that time of the week, time for the NFC West Huddle. You know the drill. We go around to every team, every market in the NFC West, and talk about their particular football team. It's training camp time. This is the training camp edition. I'm your host for this evening, Richard Stein, representing the Arizona Cardinals, and the Chimichangas, my fantasy football team, my fantasy football powerhouse, by the way, over in San Francisco. We've got Bailey O'Carroll, and she's actually a fantasy football champion with her Bailey's Brilliant Football Team. In Seattle, we got the man, Aaron Levine, and of course, LA, big timing us once again. But, you know, that just gives us a chance to talk smack about them, as always, right? I guess they're too good for us, right? But hey, we're going to go on without them, right? And we're going to talk about training camp so far, right? You got to love it. Football season is here. They put on the pads the other day here in Arizona. The pads are popping. So I want to ask you guys, I'm going to start with ladies first. Bailey, so far, excluding the rookies, who has been the star of training camp over in San Francisco?
Christian McCaffrey has been the star of training camp, but the storyline, of course, last season was that he was injured basically the entire last season, and so there was a lot of question marks coming into training camp. How would he look? Is he going to look a step slow? And I can tell you from being out there multiple times, Christian McCaffrey, to probably nobody's surprise, but has not missed a beat. Kyle Shanahan has repeatedly called Christian McCaffrey a psycho just because of his drive and his ability to focus and just laser in on football. And we are seeing the Christian McCaffrey that everybody who, speaking of fantasy football, drafted Christian McCaffrey first overall and was just so incredibly disappointed last season. I don't want to tell you what to do, but I will say through this point in training camp, he's looked phenomenal. He's looked smooth. He's looked like everything you want out of an offensive superstar. Brock Purdy is the other guy who's looked really good in training camp for the Niners. Of course, he signed his big deal in the offseason. A lot of question marks surrounding can Brock live up to the hype. With Brandon Ayuk out and a couple of question marks at wide receiver for this team, Brock has looked really, really good. So those are some positive signs, at least on the offensive side for the 49ers.
All right, Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to put that in my diary because you never know. The Chimichangas had him last year, so we might ride Christian McCaffrey once again. All right, over in Seattle, we got my guy, Aaron Levine. And I know this is a football show, right? We're supposed to talk about, you know, the Seahawks and the Cardinals, but I want to talk baseball for a second. What more do you guys want from us? I mean, you already got, you know, Gino Suarez. You got Josh Naylor. I mean, you just take you people. Yeah, I mean, you people, you Seattle sports fans, like enough already. Okay. All right, that was just my rant. Sorry,
wouldn't the city and the baseball team that has never gone to the World Series actually deserve a decent trade deadline? That's finally what we're getting. I'm also a little disappointed, Richard, that everybody else's fantasy football team gets a shout out on this show, but there's no love for the Golden Tate Warriors on this show to this point, unless I have to bring them up. Either way, we're going to make a title run this season. Absolutely. Now, to get to your other question. The primary question at hand here, the guy that has stood out to me at Seahawks training camp is tight end A.J. Barner. You know, Noah Fant no longer on this team. Barner, he's out there making some plays right now. Remember, he had 4 touchdowns last season. Fant only had 1. This new offense under Clint Kubiak emphasizes the tight end a lot more. I believe New Orleans actually ranked 8th in tight end targets in the passing game last season with Clint Kubiak there. So I know I'm not supposed to mention rookies here, but Elijah Arroyo might be able to stretch the field a little more than a traditional tight end. But look for Barner then to be a major target in the red zone and probably a very reliable security blanket for Sam Darnold as well. Barner had a great catch today in traffic, and then he let the defense know that he was a factor to be reckoned with. I love the confidence, so keep an eye on A.J. Barner this upcoming season.
And I love the fantasy football name. That is awesome. Yes, not a decent trade deadline for you guys, an awesome trade deadline for you guys when it comes to the Seattle Mariners. As you can tell, I'm here at Cardinals training camp, but the crowd's going a little crazy right now. Practice just ended. But one guy that has been absolutely fantastic for the Arizona Cardinals so far in camp is Trey McBride, the tight end. He has been absolutely, he was great last year, and he's really picked up where he left off. He's confident, he's chirping out there. So he has been the star of camp, but He's 1A. 1B is Marvin Harrison. He's right there with him. He's bulked up. Last year, after his rookie year, he left the facility and he looked like Marvin Harrison. This year, he looks like James Harrison because he's bulked up so much. He's huge. He was Maserati Marv last year. Now he's Maserati Marv, and he's souped up. He looks good. So both of those guys are great. Right? All right, so now I want to talk. You mentioned you kind of cheated already, Aaron. What do you know? You're breaking the rules.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to mention rookies. Now I'm going to ask you, over there in Seattle, what rookie is shining bright so far?
Yeah, so I'm trying to get as much rookie love on the show as possible. So I mentioned Elijah Arroyo in the first segment. A lot of rookies to choose from. I'm actually going to go with Nick Imanwori, the Seahawks' second-round pick on defense. He had his second interception of training camp earlier today during team session. And some interesting thoughts from Mike McDonald after practice. He said he's not trying to overcoach Imanwori at this stage of the game. That's kind of a nod to the idea of paralysis by analysis. If you give a new player way too much information, he's just not going to play as free as he can and rely on his natural instincts. McDonald said, hey, listen, I'm a guy who needs to be told everything to do, but with Nick Imanwori, I try to give him a general concept of what's going on out there and what we're looking for, and then we're just going to kind of let him play. I'm kind of curious how that pans out in this defense at the safety position. It almost reminds me of the way McDonald approached Devin Witherspoon last year. I know it's a different position. He is a defensive back, though. And McDonald took responsibility for not putting Witherspoon in the best position sometimes last year. But once he did, Witherspoon started to shine. I think we're going to see something similar this season with Nick Imanwori because he is a physical beast.
Yeah, there's some big boys out there, even here at Cardinals camp as well. And, when it comes to our rookies here, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm learning from you, Aaron. I learned it from watching you. I'm going to go with Darius Robinson, even though he's in his second year contract-wise. It's really his rookie year because last year he didn't play. He got hurt, missed all the camp. Pretty much he had the calf strain. So it's like a red shirt year, right? And, boy, you can tell he's been chomping at the bit to get out there. He's a defensive lineman out of Missouri, and he's such a smart player, such a student of the game. I've been watching him, like, after practice, he stays late. After every drill, he's going over technique. So you can tell the poor guy has just been waiting to get out there on the football field. So it's better to say whoa than go, right? And he's a guy you got to say whoa to sometimes. So that's pretty cool to see. So I'm going to say him, but if I have to pick a legit rookie, I'll say Cody Simon. But anyway, Bailey, you're no rookie, right? You're one of the best of the best. Over there in San Fran, how your rookies looking?
Gosh, they look good. And the rookies for this team are so important. Kyle Shanahan said that they could have, Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the 49ers, said that they could have 9 rookies starting this season. Of course, the Niners roster got just absolutely obliterated this offseason. Most of them went to the Denver Broncos, which that's a story for another day. The obvious answer of rookies who have stood out is Mykel Williams. Of course, he was who the Niners took with that top draft pick, or their top draft pick, I should say. But the non-obvious answer, I'm going to say CJ West. The Niners needed a lot of help when it comes to D-line, so he is right there. Robert Saleh, Jets head coach last season, he's back as the defensive coordinator for this Niners team. Called him a fire hydrant. He's explosive. He's everything that you want to have on a player on your D-line. He's looked phenomenal all camp long. Just the other day, I think it was on Monday, he got involved in a little, I hesitate to even call it like a scuffle, but whatever the lighter version of a scuffle is, but in a good way. It shows that these rookies are ready. They're ready to compete, and they're 100% in. Fred Warner did have to jump in there and sort of break things up a little bit, but true to Fred Warner's personality, he was hyping him up after. He's like, that's what we like to see. We like that energy. We like that fire. So I'm going to say CJ West. Mykel Williams hasn't looked bad. Now he's dealing with a minor ankle injury. Kind of a longer list of injuries already at this point for the 49ers, which is also unfortunate, but it's something they haven't dealt with before.
I got to admit, I'm loving the nicknames out there. Psycho, fire hydrant. I mean, that's pretty. You guys are mid-season form when it comes to nicknames or, describing people. That's for sure, right? You always have competition at position.
Exactly.
That's always healthy for a team. But you always have units competing against each other, offense against defense. So, I want to ask what unit is winning so far? Over here in Arizona, it's the defense, but that's normally the case. The defense is usually ahead of the offense, especially early in camp, early in the season, because you got offense and so much timing, so much rhythm. And when they first had the first couple practices and pads, the defense won for sure, to the point where Coach Gannon was like, you know what, let's go with pads again. Second day in a row, which is pretty rare, and the offense kind of stepped it up. As I mentioned, Trey, McBride, Marvin Harrison making plays out there. But the defense for the Cardinals has looked good, as we mentioned. Earlier in the offseason, the Cardinals went all in on defense. Every pick in the draft but one was on the defensive side of the football. They brought in Josh Sweat for the Eagles, who was fantastic in the Super Bowl, just as Patrick Mahomes. So the defense is ahead here in Arizona. Aaron, over there in Seattle, who's winning offense or defense?
Well, before I answer that question, I first want to tell Bailey, give a note to Kyle Shanahan and let him know that we are perfectly fine if he decides to play 9 rookies in their very first game up here in Seattle on September 7th. Just bring it on. We'll be more than accommodating. I'm sure the 12s will have a great time welcoming them here to Seattle and welcoming them to the NFL. And you can respond in a bit. I mean, listen, it's a back-and-forth battle so far. The offense wins one day. The defense wins the next day. Listen, it got to the point where McDonald challenged his offense after the defense won a couple days, and then the offense stepped up to that challenge. In fact, Sam Darnold and the offense won earlier today. It's encouraging to see this offense win days because, remember, this is the second year the defense has had Mike McDonald overseeing things on that side of the ball. This is the first year on offense with Clint Kubiak running the show. We do know this. All of the running game installs are not yet in 100%. They're really taking a lot of time making sure everyone is on the same page in that regard. Again, this is a reason I think a lot of people are underestimating the Seahawks offense this season simply because they lost Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. So going forward, I really believe that this offense is going to be much better than people give them credit for. And I think Sam Darnold is that guy. Once you get that diary back, you can write that down for the second year in a row. It's not so Geno Smith. Just cross out Geno's name and write in Sam Darnold.
I knew you had to mention Geno Smith. It's funny. I was expecting you to say Geno Smith was the star of camp, even though he's not even there. You love him so much. So I'm happy you got your Geno Smith mention in there.
Yeah.
And Bailey, I do got to agree with Aaron on this one. When you're starting 9 rookies, I remember when you said that, I'm like, I think that's a good sign. So first a response to that, and then let us know, who's winning out there, offense or defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not the ideal situation, but their rookies looked great last year. They had so many injuries at the beginning of the season. This Niners team did. I'm pretty sure there was a rookie. I'm pretty sure Malik Mustafa, who had, I can't remember if it was a pick 6, but at least a pick in Seattle last season. It's okay. But it's definitely not an ideal situation. But if that's the task at hand, if that's what your options are, that's what your options are. The Niners, it's no secret, ran into some serious salary cap issues. That's why they had to let a number of those guys go. They're certainly going to miss Dre Greenlaw, who was Fred Warner's partner in crime back there at the linebacker position. It's going to be a young line, but it balances itself out so much. You've got Nick Bosa, you've got Trent Williams. So I think that a lot of these guys are learning from those veterans. It feels weird to call Nick Bosa and Fred Warner veterans because they are, I still think of them as pretty young, but they've been in the league for years and years at this point. So they have said through this training camp that this rookie class is so eager to learn from them, probably more so than any other rookie class when it comes to just asking questions and picking their brains. So we'll see how it all plays out in due time. But gosh, it's been so back and forth with this offense and defense. But I'll give it to the defense. I think they're edging out the offense a little bit. But I will say I think that my answer would be flipped if the wide receiver situation is different. Of course, Brandon Ayuk, who tore his ACL last season, will not be back for the start of the season, so he obviously hasn't been at training camp. You have, Ricky Pearsall, who really didn't play most of last year. He started the season on the PUP list. He just got off, but then he had a rest day yesterday, so we haven't seen too much out of him. And then Juwan Jennings, who sort of stepped into that wide receiver 1 role, retweaked his calf injury, so we haven't seen too much of him either. So I'll give it to the defense, but I do think my answer flips if you got a healthy receiver core for Brock Purdy to target.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's always the key, right, is who's healthier. On which side of the football do you have, more injuries and stuff. And so, yeah, Aaron, you said Sam Darnold, is that guy? Well, he's not that guy, but he's just a guy. So we'll get that out of the way, right away, right? And I know it all depends on coaches and what their philosophy is. But when it comes to the preseason, do you guys think your starters on your team should play more? Aaron, let's go to you. What are your thoughts on the preseason and how your particular team is approaching it, and what you think about if starters should play more or less than they have been in your area or not?
I mean, listen, the starters just don't play enough, period, throughout all of the preseason in the NFL. Now, I think Mike McDonald puts a lot into the preseason itself, just not necessarily the preseason games when it comes to playing his top players. I mean, you see this with the closed-door practices they have. They had them last year, 2 of them in Tennessee, 2 or 3 of them in Tennessee. This year, they're going to have one behind closed doors in Green Bay before the actual preseason game. So they get to go ones against ones behind closed doors where nobody gets to see it. They get to try some things they normally would during the regular season and see what works and see what doesn't work. But then everyone gets to publicly on TV see the vanilla offense and the vanilla defense. Personally, I think we just get rid of the preseason altogether. Play it like the college football season. I mean, one loss is not going to eliminate you from a Super Bowl run like it possibly used to in college football with the national championship. So work out all the issues on the fly during games that actually count. It would be much more meaningful for the fans out there also, instead of making them pay full price to watch third stringers running around the field. It just makes no sense. It never has. Fortunately, we're down to 3 preseason games. Hopefully soon we'll be down to just 2 with 18 regular season games. So that's more bang for your buck and more appealing football to every football fan across the country going forward.
One quick question. Who are you and what have you done to Aaron Levine? Because I'm agreeing with you way too much today, and I don't like that feeling. It's kind of weird because I do agree with you about, the preseason. But, it is what it is, right? Kyler Murray hardly ever plays in the preseason. And you look at other teams, the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, those guys play a lot in the preseason, and it's proven to be successful over there. Like I mentioned before I asked the question, I guess it all depends on the coaching staff, but I think you got to play preseason because you got to be ready for game speed, not just mentally to read plays and react, but even your body. Because I think sometimes if you go from 0 to 60, you're going to have some injuries because guys haven't been going full speed, against another team. Yeah, you do it in practice, but after a while, it becomes routine because you know who's defending you or who you're going up against on defense. So I think the preseason is important if you approach it that way, right? And play games and make it mean something mentally and physically. So I say if you're going to play the preseason games, might as well do it, right? If your team's going to be in the game, get your starters in there, at least till they get a rhythm, work up a lather, and you feel comfortable before you start playing for keeps. Bailey, what do you think? How are you guys approaching that over there in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of importance placed on the preseason, especially this year. 2 different reasons. Number one, I keep going back to those 9 rookies that could start. Preseason vital for those 9 rookies to just get adjusted, get accustomed to life in the NFL. I know that's one thing that so many rookies say every year. You hear it every season that it's so much faster than college. It's just different than college. And so this is sort of that grace period to adjust. I absolutely agree. I don't really think preseason is fair to the fans because you're paying full price and you're not seeing the quality of football that you do when the starters are in. But in the Niners case, yeah, there's always injury risk when you start your starters in the preseason. And of course you don't want a Brock Purdy, you don't want a Nick Bosa, a Fred Warner, a Christian McCaffrey to go down with an injury in the preseason. That would be horrible and just deflating for your entire season ahead when you haven't even really started it. But this Niners team underperformed so much last year. And yes, you can point to injuries affecting this team, but when OTA started, every starter, every single starter, no matter how long they have been in the NFL, showed up, and that means that this team is ready to go. I think if that wasn't the case, it would be alarming because of how much they underperformed. So yeah, I think the starters should be out there a reasonable amount because they didn't prove a whole lot last year. So if they want to prove themselves worthy of those massive contracts, looking at Nick Bosa, you know, a lot of people didn't think he lived up to the paycheck that the Niners cut him last season. So I think the preseason is necessary for these guys to show a little bit of what they're made of and just get into the flow of things, into football season, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, and you made a good point, Bailey, because you hate to see, you know, key players get hurt in a preseason game, meaningless game. So it's always a tricky situation, right? But that's part of training camp. That's part of navigating through camp, navigating through the preseason. And, you know, I love training camp just because I know the regular season's approaching, right? You got to get through this to get to the good stuff. And, you know, I've been covering a lot of camps for over the years. Aaron, over there in Seattle, do you remember your first ever NFL training camp, and what was that like for you personally?
Well, fortunately, my first year in Seattle was 2007, and the Seahawks did their training camp in Cheney, Washington for 11 years from 1996 to 2006, I believe. It was like 11 years in that period, but it ended months before I got to Seattle. So I fortunately did not have to live in the dorm rooms at Eastern Washington University with the rest of the media like they had the previous decade. Instead, my first training camp was at the Seahawks facility in Kirkland. It was right next to Northwest University. I don't necessarily remember whether this was the first year or the second year, but Mike Holmgren was head coach, and obviously he's an imposing person, very intimidating, nicest guy in the world when you get to talk to him, but he had this presence on the football field. And I'll never forget one morning, there was a tight end by the name of Jeb Putzier, and Jeb dropped a pass. And Mike Holmgren could be so intimidating without using any curse words. And his face got red, and he looked at Jeb, and he just exploded, and he said, "Jeb, you didn't eat your Cheerios this morning." And I was scared. I mean, it's the funniest line in the world, and yet I was scared on the sideline for Jeb Putzier and seeing whether he was going to be benched for the rest of the whole training camp for missing one catch. So that was my biggest memory, I believe, from at least the first couple of years here in Seattle at Seahawks training camp.
That's great. I used to love Cheerios. Now I'm a Raisin Bran guy. It's better, you know, it's healthier. Hey Bailey, what about you? Do you remember your first ever camp? What was that like for you?
This is my first full training camp. I feel like I'm right there with the rookies. I know. I sort of slid in to the sports role in the middle/beginning of last season, but I think it was like preseason game 1. So it was just after training camp. So this is my first training camp. I don't have any stories about like cereal being called out or anybody yelled at. You know, Kyle Shanahan keeps things like pretty close to the chest. But there's been a few things, a few little scuffles here and there, but nothing that like jumps out off the page.
That's great. Well, yeah, congrats on your first NFL training camp. And, you know, it's funny because I was, you know, here out at Cards Camp just yesterday, and I saw a young kid out there, and I could tell he was young, a college kid. So, you know, he was by himself, and he's in the background, he's trying to stay out of the way. And I go up and I introduce myself to him. Turns out he's an intern at the local paper here, part of the Pedro Gomez Scholarship Foundation. It was pretty cool. And so I asked him, I go, "Is this your first ever NFL practice?" He goes, like, "His eyes were this big." He's like, "I've never experienced anything like this." He was so excited. And I'm like, yeah, because I could relate. I remember my first NFL training camp and how excited I was. And so I told him, I go, "Yeah, I remember my first camp." I go, "It was Oilers training camp, Houston Oilers. Ward Moon was the starting quarterback." And he was like, "Wow." He goes, "You just dated yourself." And I was like, "I guess I did." Yeah, they're not even a franchise anymore, you know, Tennessee Titans. So we kind of laughed about that and got a kick out of it. But I do remember just thinking, man, if I could get paid to do this would be awesome. You know, and I'll never forget, you know, watching, you know, Mike Rozier was on the team and stuff. And so I asked this kid, I go, so what do you think? And he's like, oh, this is great. I go, can you imagine getting paid for this? He's like, I know. So he's in. We got a future sportscaster of America with this guy. And that's the great thing about, the gigs that we have, right? It beats working for a living. We're getting paid to talk about sports. So it's a good life, right? It's a good time to be a football fan because everybody's undefeated right now. And, whether you're starting 9 rookies, 0 rookies, or you got Sam Darnold quarterback, you got a chance. And you're saying there's a chance, right?
There's a chance.
So, of course, we'll be talking.
And sign that young guy up. He could represent the Rams in Los Angeles, and we could have a full foursome here, huh?
You know what? Actually, I'm going to go look for him. Maybe he'll join us next week. Somebody from LA. I know you guys will be there. I'll be here. So thanks for joining us, and we'll do it again next week. Guys, it's good to be back. I missed you guys.